Pigs, his mother said. Don't try to be clever. Have you forgotten already that you are on probation? That it is forbidden for you to leave the village after sunset, and with a spear. Enemies will see you. They will report you. They will send you back to jail. Her voice rose to a wail. Then who will look after the crops and the cattle? I will be back soon, Jagat Singh said. There is nothing to worry about. Everyone in the village is asleep. No, his mother said. She wailed again. Shut up, he said. It is you who will wake the neighbors. Be quiet and there will be no trouble. Go wherever you want to go. If you want to jump in a well, jump. If you want to hang like your father, go and hang. It is lot to weep, my kismet, she added, slapping her forehead. It is all written there. Jugat Singh opened the door and looked on both sides. There was no one about. He walked along the walls till he got to the end of the lane near the pond. He could see the grey form of a couple of adjutant stock slowly pacing up and down in the mud looking for frogs. They paused in their search. Jagat Singh stood still against the wall till the stock were reassured, then went off the footpath across the fields toward the river. He crossed the dry sand bed till he got to the stream. He stuck his spear in the ground with the blade pointing upward, then stretched out on the sand. He lay on his back and gazed at the star. A meteor shot across the Milky Way, trailing a silver path down the blue black sky. Suddenly a hand on was on his eyes. Guess who? Jagat Singh stretched out his hands over his head, and behind him, groping, the girl dodged them. Jagat Singh started with the hands with a hand on his eyes and felt his way up from the arm to the shoulder and then on to the face. He caressed her cheeks, eyes, and nose that his hand knew so well. He tried to play with her lips to induce them to kiss his fingers. The girl opened her mouth and bit him fiercely. Jagat Singh jerked his hand away. With a quick movement, he caught the girl's head in his both hands and brought her face over to his. Then he slipped his arms under her waist and hoisted her into the air above him with her arms and legs kicking about like a crab. He turned her about till his arms ached. He brought her down flat upon him, limb to limb. Then the girl slapped on his face. You put your hands on the person of a strange woman? Have you no mother or sister in your home? Have you no shame? No wonder the police have got you on the register as a bad character. I will also tell the Inspector Sahib that you are a badmash. I am not badmash with you, Nuru. We should both be locked up in the same cell. You have learned to talk too much. I will have to look for another man. Jagat Singh crossed his arms behind the girl's back and crushed her till she could not talk or breathe. Every time she started to speak, he tightened his arms around her, and her words got stuck in her throat. She gave up and put her exhausted face against him. She laid her beside him, with her head nestling in the hollow of his left arm. With his right hand, she stroked her face and hair. The goods train engine whistled twice, and with a lot of groaning and creaking began to puff its way towards the bridge. The stock flew up from the pond with shrill cries of crack crack and came towards the river. From the river they flew back to the pond, calling alternatively long after the train had gone over the bridge and its puffs had died into silence. Jagat Singh's caresses became lustful. His hand strayed from the girl's face to her breasts and her waist. She caught it and put it back on her face. His breathing became slow and sensuous. His hand wandered again and brushed her breasts as if by mistake. The girl slapped it and put it away. Jagat Singh stretched his left hand that lay under the girl's head and caught her reproving hand. Her other arm was already under him. She was defenseless. No, no, no. Let go my hand. No, I will not speak to you again. She shook her head violently from side to side, trying to avoid his hungry mouth. Jagat Singh slipped his hand inside her t-shirt and felt the contours of her unguarded breasts. They became taut, the nipple became hard and leathery. His rough hands gently moved up and down from her breasts to her navel. The skin on her belly came up in the goose flesh. The girl continued to wriggle and protest. No, 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 please. May Allah's curse fall on you. Let go my hand. I will never meet you again if you behave like this. Jagat Singh's searching hand found one end of the cord of her trousers. He pulled it with a jerk. No, cried the girl hoarsely. A shot rang through the night. The stork flew up from the pond, calling to each other. Crows started cawing in the kikar trees. Jagat Singh paused and looked up into the darkness towards the village. The girl quietly extricated herself from his hold and adjusted her dress. The crows settled back on the trees. The stork flew away across the river. Only the dogs barked. It sounded like a gunshot, she said nervously, trying to keep Jagat Singh from renewing his love making. Wasn't it from the village? I don't know. Why are you trying to run away? It is all quiet now. Jagat Singh pulled her down beside him. This is no time for jesting. This is murder in the village. My father will get up and want to know where I have gone. I must get back at once. No, you will not. I won't let you. You can say you were with the girlfriend. Don't talk like a stupid peasant. How? Jagat Singh shut her mouth with his. He bore upon her with his enormous weight. Before she could free up her arms, he ripped open the cord of her trousers and once again, let me go, let me go. She could not struggle against Jagat Singh's brute force. She did not particularly want to. Her world was narrowed to a rhythmic sound of breathing, and the warm smell of dusky skins raised to a fever heat. His lips slubbered over her eyes and cheeks. His tongue sought the inside of her ears. In a state of frenzy, she dug her nails into his thinly bearded cheeks and bit his nose. The stars above her went into a mad whirl and then came back to a places like a merry-go-round slowly coming to a stop. Life came back to its cooler and lower level. She felt the dead weight of the lifeless man, the sand gritting in her hair, the breeze trespassing on her naked limbs, the sensuous stare of the myriads of stars. She pushed Jagat Singh away. He lay down beside her. That is all you want, and you get it. You are just a peasant, always wanting to sow your seed. Even if the world were going to hell, you would want to do that. Even when guns are being fired in the village, wouldn't you? She nagged. Nobody is firing any guns, just your imagination, answered Jagat Singh wearily without looking at her. Faint cries of wailing wafted across the riverside. The couple sat up to listen. Two shots rang out in the quick succession. The crows flew out of the kikars, cawing furiously. The girl began to cry. Something is happening in the village. My father will wake up and know I have gone out. He will kill me. Jagat Singh was not listening to her. He did not know what to do. If his absence from the village was discovered, he would be in trouble with the police. That did not bother him as much as the trouble that the girl would be in. She might not come again, she was saying, so I will never come to see you again. If Allah forgives me this time, I will never do it again. Will you shut up, or do I have to smack your face? The girl began to sob. She found it hard to believe this was the same man who had been making love to her a moment ago. Quiet, there is someone coming, whispered Jagat Singh, putting his heavy hand on her mouth. The couple lay still, peering into the dark. The 5 men carrying guns and spears passed within a few yards of them. They had uncovered their faces and were talking. Daku, do you know them? The girls asked in a whisper. Yes, Jagat Singh said. The one with the torch is Mali. His face went tight. That incestuous lover of his sister. I have told him 1,000 times this was no time for dacoities, and now he has brought his gang to my village. I will settle this with them. The dacoits went up to the river and then downstream towards the ford, a couple of miles to the south. A pair of lapwings pierced the still night with startled cries. Teet, Teet teet hoot. Teet teet hoot 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 hoot. Will you report them to the police? Jagat Singh sniggered. Let us get back before they miss me in the village. The pair walked back towards Manu Majra, the man in front, the girl a few paces behind him. They could hear the sound of wailing and barking of dogs. Women were shouting to each other across the roofs. The whole village seemed to be awake. Jagat Singh stopped near the pond and turned round to speak to the girl. Noru, will you come tomorrow? He asked, pleading. You think of tomorrow? And I am bothered about my life. You have your good time even if I am murdered. No one can harm you while I live. No one in Mano Majra can raise his eyebrows at you and get away from Jagga. I am not a Badmash for nothing, he said haughtily. You tell me tomorrow what happens or the day after tomorrow when all this, whatever it is over, after the goods train? No, 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 answered the girl. What will I say to my mother now? This noise is bound to have woken him up. Just say you had gone out, your stomach was upset and something like that. You heard the firing and were hiding till the dacoits had left. Will you come the day? Will you come the day after tomorrow then? No, she repeated, this time a little less emphatically. The excuse might work. Just as well, her father was almost blind. He would not see her silk shirt, nor the antimony in her eyes. Nooran walked away into the darkness, swearing she would never come back. Jagat Singh went up to the lane to his house. The door was open. Several villagers were in the courtyard talking to his mother. He turned around quietly and made his way to the river. In a bureaucratic circle, Manu Majra has some importance because of an officer's rest house just north of the railway bridge. It is a flat roofed bungalow made of khaki bricks with a veranda in the facing the river. It stands in the middle of a squarish plot enclosed by a low wall. From the gate to the veranda runs a road with a row of bricks to decal edge each side and mark it off from the garden. The garden is a pancake of plastered mud without a blade of grass to break its flat, even surface. But a few scraggy bushes of jasmine grow beside the column of the veranda and near the row of servants' quarters at the rear of the house. The rest house was originally built for the engineer in charge of construction of the bridge. After the completion of the bridge, it became the common property of all senior officers. Its popularity is due to its proximity to the river. All about it are wild wastes of pampas grass and dhak, or frame of the forest. And here, partridge call to their mates from sunrise to sundown. When the river has receded to its winter channel, the bulrushes grows in the marshes and ponds left behind. Geese, mallard, widgeon, teal, and many other kind of waterfowl frequent these places, and the larger pools abound with rahu and mali and masheer. Throughout the river months, officers arrange tours that involve a short halt at the Mano Majra rest house. They go for waterfowl at sunrise, for partridge during the day, fish in the afternoon, and once more for ducks when they come back in their evening flight. In spring, the Romans come to ruminate, to sip their whiskey, and see the bright orange of the thuk, dhak, shame the rich red hues of the sun setting over the river, to hear the soothing snore of the frogs in the marshes and the rumble of trains that go by, to watch fireflies flitting among the reeds as the moon comes up from under the arches of the bridge. During the early months of summer, only those who are looking for solitude come to Manu Majra at rest house. But once the monsoon breaks, the visitors multiply, for the swollen waters of the Satluj are a grand and terrifying sight. On the morning before the dacoity in Manu Majra, the rest house had been done up to receive an important guest. The sweeper had washed the bathrooms, they swept the rooms, they sprinkled water on the roads. The bearer and his wife had dusted and rearranged the furniture. The sweeper's boy had unwounded the rope on the pankha which hung from the ceiling, and put it through the hole in the wall so that he could pull it from the veranda. He had put a new red loin cloth and was sitting on the veranda tying and untying knots in the panka rope. From the kitchen came the smell of currying chicken. At 11 o'clock, a sub-inspector of police and two constables turned up on bicycle to inspect the arrangements. Then two orderlies arrived. They wore white uniforms with red sashes around their waist and white turbans with broad bands in front. On the bands were pinned brass emblems of Government of the Punjab, the sun rising over five wavy lines representing the rivers of the province. With them were several villagers who carried the baggage in the glossy black official dispatch cases. An hour later, a large grey American car rolled in. An orderly stepped out of the front seat and opened the rear door for his master. The sub-inspector and the policeman came to attention and saluted. The villagers moved away to a respectful distance. The bearer opened the wire gauge door leading to the main bed-sitting room. Mr. Hukum Chand, magistrate and deputy commissioner of the district, heaved his corpulent frame out of the car. He had been travelling all morning and was somewhat tired and stiff. A cigarette perked on his lower lip sent a thin stream of smoke into his eyes. In his right hand he held a cigarette tin and a box of matches. He ambled up to the inspector and gave him a friendly slap on the back, while the other still stood at the attention. "Come along, Inspector Sahib, come in," said Hukum Chand. He took the inspector's right hand and led him into the room. The bearer and the deputy commissioner's personal servant followed. The constable helped the chauffeur to take the luggage out of the car. Hukum Chand went straight into the bathroom and washed the dust off his face. He came back, still wiping his face with a towel. Sub-inspector stood up again. Sit down," he commanded. He flung the towel on his bed and sank into an armchair. The punko began to flap forward and backward to the grating sound of the rope moving in the hole in the wall. One of the orderlies undid the magistrate's shoes and took off his socks and began to rub his feet. The Hukumchand opened the cigarette tin and held it out to the inspectors. The sub-inspector lit the magistrate's cigarette and then his own. Hukumchand's style of smoking betrayed his lower middle class origin. He sucked noisily, his mouth glued to his clenched fist. He dropped cigarette's ash by snapping his fingers with a flourish. The sub-inspector, who was a younger man, had a more sophisticated manner. "Well, Inspector Sahib, how are things?" Sub-inspector joined his hands. "God is merciful. We only pray for your kindness. No communal trouble in this area?" "We have escaped it so far, sir. Convoys of Sikh and Hindu refugees from Pakistan have come through and some Muslims have gone out. But we have had no incidents." "You haven't had convoys of dead Sikhs this side of the frontier?" "They had been coming through at Amritsar. Not one person living. There has been killing over there." Hukum Chand held up both his hands and let them drop heavily on his thigh in the gesture of resignation. Sparks flew off his cigarette and fell on his trousers. The sub-inspector slapped them to extinction with obsequious haste. "Do you know," continued the magistrate, "the Sikhs retaliated by attacking a Muslim refugee train, sending it across the border. Over 1,000 corpses. They wrote on the engine, 'Gift to Pakistan.'" The sub-inspector looked down thoughtfully and answered, "They say that is the only way to stop killing on the other side. Men for men, woman for woman, child for child. But we Hindus are not like that. We cannot really play this stabbing game. When it comes to an open fight, we can be a match for any people. I believe our RSS boys beat up Muslim gangs in all the